Welcome and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Jane Irrigation Training Series. I'm your host, Richard Vestuccia, and today we're going to be talking about a simple solution to a complex question. And I say that and I smile when I say it because simply just digging a hole isn't going to probably solve all your problems when it comes to my soil moisture sensors doing the right job or not. But it certainly will provide some quick relief to making sure that things are going the way you want. And so I really appreciate that Connor Cunningham presented this idea this week, or is going to today, because again, we always think and we know and we're confident in some of the processes we're doing, but there's some simple, easy ways to check to make sure that your process is accurate, to kind of give you that peace of mind so that you can rest easier, right? When we're talking about some of these crops that we're watering, we're talking about millions of dollars of liability in the field, and you want to be right, and you want to be confident, and you want to know you're right. So Connor's going to bring us some relief. Now, for those of you who haven't seen Connor, Connor's a technical sales and product manager for Jane Irrigation. He's also part of the water management consulting team that's been doing such great work with the growers in the Central Valley the past few years. He brings a ton of technical knowledge to water management and has been active in this arena for many years now. He's a native to the Central Valley, and he puts on a great presentation on all his webinars. So really appreciate him coming today. So Connor, welcome, and thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the nice words in the introduction there. I've been, like I was telling you, I'm really excited about the topic that we're going to be talking about today. Just today alone, I've received 2 calls on this exact topic right here. This is something that a lot of people are looking towards, like we were talking about. It's going to be getting hot. And so with the increased heat, guys want to know, and gals, excuse me, guys and gals want to know where they're at when it comes to their soil moisture status. They want to know, okay, how ahead or behind am I when these days are going to start getting hotter and hotter, and there's going to be more of them in succession. I need to know where I'm at so that way I can be ready for this intense heat here in the Central Valley, especially. So that's why this is something that's really important to discuss. And it's actually really well timed. I've been doing a number of these calls. I haven't really been at my desk that much these past few weeks. I've been out in the field a lot, doing exactly what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, it's interesting, Connor, because I've heard you and some of your colleagues talking, and you say oftentimes, I'll put a new grower on Jane Logic, and sure enough, they just won't believe that their plants, their trees are getting enough water, and right. We'll go show them. We'll dig the hole, and they'll understand that it is working the way it's supposed to.
Exactly. And that's really the whole purpose and the whole reason why we're talking about this today is, what does that soil moisture data mean? If I'm getting a reading of X, what does that mean in reference to how full my soil is? And that's why we go and do this. We go and dig a hole so that way we can have that reference. A lot of growers already know how to dig a hole. A lot of them know, okay, if I squeeze the soil, it does this. If I can make it ribbon, I know that it means this. I know that I have X amount of soil moisture approximately. With that, we can take that reference of something that's known, and then we can apply it to this quote unquote unknown, this data coming off of a soil moisture probe. But then the soil moisture probe kind of takes it that step further, and it gives us that numerical value that we can start to work with and start to be a little bit more efficient. So I think that that's what a lot of people are looking for, and we're able to do that. So let's go ahead and jump into it, and we'll start talking about how we can start to do that. So when I start to talk to new growers, whether at industry events, trade shows, or even when I'm just doing my cold calls, a lot of the growers that learn that I deal with automation and monitoring, more times than not will say, well, you can't replace boots in the field. You need to be out there. I don't disagree with that at all. I think that's exactly why we're talking about what we're talking about today is we need those boots in the field for numerous reasons. But in order to make the data coming off of these sensors actionable, we need to have those boots in the field from time to time. But the caveat to that is we're just making those boots a little bit more efficient with the tools that we have available to us. In today's market, we can't afford to be inefficient. We have too many costs that have gone up over time in a very short amount of time. And there's also some unknown variables that we can't foresee. So we really need to make sure that we're being as efficient with our time and our funds as possible. So, one of the first places that I start is actually the NRCS has a guide on how to do these methods. And at said trade shows, I actually picked up this little pamphlet here. And inside this pamphlet, we have, some pictures showing the different soil types. There's even a flip out flow chart that you can follow along. So this is something that I keep in my truck and I refer to frequently. But let's say you didn't have this, or you didn't go to a trade show recently and pick one of these up. This link that I have on the screen here, you can actually go and download this for free. And I highly recommend that you print this out, laminate it, put it in a folder, put it in a binder. This is a great reference and a great document that you should have with you in your truck. So that way you can refer back to it if you ever have any questions. So that's kind of the first place I start, is refreshing my memory with something like this. And then just
Connor, we have a question already. I just wanted to ask, and I want to remind everybody, we do have the Q&A and the chat open. So if you have some questions or want to make a comment, just drop them in there and I'll ask Connor when appropriate. So Connor, the first question we have though here is, what really is ground truthing, right? So it's a concept, right? What is that?
Yeah, definitely. So ground truthing is, I guess what you would say is it's a way to reference that what we're seeing in the data, what we're seeing in the virtual is what's actually going on in the physical. So that's what I'm talking about when we're talking about ground truthing.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Good question. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't even think to specify that.
Not everybody's familiar with it,
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, no. So going back to what I was talking about here. So I like to start off having this reference available to me. So if I ever have any questions myself, I can refer back to that. And then just coming from a science background, I like to, when I go out to do a site visit, I like to think about what might all the factors be that would be influencing that data output. So I put a list of the things that I pay attention to when I go out and I do a site visit. These are just a small smattering. You can definitely make this an exhaustive or an inexhaustive list if you wanted to. But I definitely pay attention to where the probe is placed in the field. It might be in the tree row, might be in row with the crops. What's the environment? Are we in the Central Valley? Are we in Washington? Are we on a hill? Are we in flat ground? When was the last irrigation? And this is more important for if you're checking that when I applied irrigation, did I fill my soil up to field capacity? Did I fill it up to its maximum or not? One of the leading authorities in the industry here is the ITRC, and they actually specify in their documentation that 1 to 2 days after irrigating is when you want to go out and start to dig down and see, did you fill up that soil to its capacity or not? We were talking about weather. Weather is definitely another key factor to pay attention to. And then soil type. How does the mixture of your soil structure, soil texture, how is that influenced when you apply irrigation? How quickly does it infiltrate, so on and so forth?
So Connor, we have another question here, and this person wants to know, why wait a day or two? What's the value of that? What's the importance of that?
Yep, that's a good question. So the reason you want to do that is you want to make sure that you give that water time to move through the soil. The water just doesn't shoot down through the soil unless it's incredibly dry. But even then, it takes some time for the gravity and the water to push and move down through the soil. So you want to let it not only move through the soil, but then you also want it to come to a stop to see where it gets down to. Because let's say you are putting on too much water and you've already filled up your root zone, but you haven't allowed it to continue to percolate down past that. You want to be able to know those little caveats. So that's why you want to wait.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you for the question. So why would we want to utilize some of these tools that we have available to us? Well, I kind of already hit on the aspect earlier, was we're just trying to make ourselves a little bit more efficient. We're trying to navigate a lot of the challenges that we're faced with here in the ag industry, and having something simple like a combo of soil moisture probe and a pressure sensor make a big difference. And just those two sensors alone, you can see the benefits that I listed on the screen here. You get all these benefits and more from just those two sensors deployed in the field. So making a small change can make a big impact at the end of the day. Along with that too, you also have some virtual tools that are available to you that can help to combat some of the rising costs. So what I have here is the screenshot of our infiltration widget. And this is not something that I mocked up to look pretty for the webinar. This is actually from one of the customers that I work with. This is data coming live from a field here in the Central Valley. And this is one of my favorite tools. And when I do customer trainings, a lot of the times I'll be giving my spiel and running through my thing, and people will stop and say, wait, hold on, what's this thing right here? So it's a very powerful tool because right away you can see, okay, when did I apply irrigation? And when I applied irrigation, how deep did I go? Did I go past my target zone? And how frequently do I need to irrigate to make sure that I'm efficiently irrigating every single time I apply irrigation? So little tools that make a big impact can help us work around things. And this is also important because we have changes to how we're doing things, not only with regulatory things, but also our costs, right? PG&E just changed their peak hours. So in the past with peak hours, we could just wait until the weekend and put 48 hours on. Well, we can't do that anymore. Peak hours are every single day of the week. And if you want to, you can bite the bullet and pay the peak hour rate, or you can use data like this to understand, okay, between the hours of 5 p.m., like 8:30 p.m. one day to 5 p.m. the next day, how much water can I put on efficiently and effectively, and then avoid those peak hours, and then also not be pushing water out the bottom. We don't need to waste money pushing water out the bottom, pushing nutrients out the bottom if we're applying nutrients there, and then also just time on the pump. Even though we're not being charged peak hours, that's still cost that we're incurring and that we can keep in our pocket if we can.
So what's going on, Connor, here on 523? Is that just some starts and stops? Is that what's happening on the infiltration widget?
Yeah, it could be some starts and stops there. It could be that the customer was actually, a lot of times we'll have customers that are using the same station to fill up water trucks, or they'll just give their trees or their crops a quick shot of something. So it's not a real significant event. So it could be numerous things that could be going on, but typically that's what we're seeing is they're giving it a quick shot of nitrogen, or they might just be filling up a water truck or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Good. Thank you.
Yep. So as we know, if you try to do anything in the field, you're going to have technical issues. So to try to work around that, what I did was earlier this week, I actually went and recorded myself doing one of these site visits. So that way we could see how I approach doing one of these ground truthing events and just kind of hitting some of the key points and things that I look for. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and stop my share and we'll play that video, watch that real quick, and then we'll come back and discuss it. So let me go ahead and pull that up for us.
Yeah. So Connor, I'm so glad you did this. I love your videos. I've seen them a lot on digital media, LinkedIn and stuff, and they're really quite good. So I'm really glad that you're going to share one with us here.
Yeah, appreciate that. All right. So are we able to see the video?
Just great. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, I'll go ahead and start this up.
Hey, we're out here at one of our water management users' sites today to talk a little bit more about the topic that we're going to be discussing in the webinar, where we're talking about ground truthing and soil moisture probe data. So this is actually the C3 device right here. It's got 2 pressure sensors on it for the 2 sets that we're monitoring, and then we have our soil moisture probe over here. So follow me over here and we'll go look at that real quick. So one of the pitfalls that we want to avoid when we're installing our soil moisture probes and we're coming out and checking our probes to make sure everything is up to snuff is emitter location to where our probe location is at. So this is actually a really great example. You can see that the actual soil moisture probe is buried right there in that wet spot, and the sprinklers over here. We've talked about this before in other webinars, where if you're dealing with any sort of micro sprinkler or micro jet, that you need to make sure that the soil moisture probe is placed in the outer ring. So we think about that blue donut, that's where we want our soil moisture probe to be placed. So we want to ensure that when our system is running, that we're getting the water onto our soil moisture probe. So on top of that too, we also have our soil auger right here, and I took the liberty of digging down to about 2 feet so we can actually start to talk a little bit about the hand feel method. So with the soil moisture probes, we do want to do some ground truthing every once in a while because it's important to reference, because every field's a little bit different and there's some caveats that we want to pay attention to. So we have different microclimates here across the valley. We also have different soil types that we need to take into consideration. And much like people, plants are also living organisms, and so they'll consume at different rates. You can actually see the difference between these two trees right here, how this one's a little bit bigger, this one's a little bit smaller. So they're going to consume at different rates. When you're taking your soil moisture samples with your auger, you want to try to be as representative of your soil moisture probe as possible. Since your soil moisture probe is right there, I just wanted to go on the other side of the berm into the wetting pattern there, so that way it will be as close to what the soil moisture probe is reading as possible. I don't want to come over here to this other tree because that'll have a different consumption rate. So let me pull this probe out and we'll actually look at the sample and see what that looks like. So when we're doing the hand feel method, the nice part about soil moisture augers is that they give us an undisturbed soil sample. So if you wanted to take this to a lab, you would empty this into a plastic bag, seal it up, date it, mark it, name it, put as much information as you can. So that way when the lab gets the sample, they'll record all that and you can have as much recorded for that sample as possible. So when we're looking at this soil moisture sample here, by doing the hand feel method, we're going to take this undisturbed sample and now we're going to go ahead and crush it in our hand, give it some good squeezes, and see how it reacts to the palm of our hand. The other thing that we're looking for too is seeing if it stays together in a ball. So we can see that it's sticking to my hand, we're seeing that it's staying in a ball, and we could even take it here between my thumb and my forefinger and try to ribbon and see if it ribbons. So this tells us a lot of different information about our soil type and our soil structure, as well as our soil moisture. So we take all this information together, we combine it, we also look at our soil moisture data as well, and then we start to be able to make some decisions, as well as be able to make sure that our probes are set accurately to represent what the current status might be for the soil at any given time.
Connor, that was excellent. We just did a irrigation training series first, and that was live training from the field in a recorded version. That was really good and really interesting.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So with that, that kind of sets the stage for a real world example that I have here on this next slide. So just confirming you can see my slides, yeah?
Yeah, just great.
Perfect. So what I did was I actually pulled this exact scenario that I just put for you in that video. I actually just did this at another grower site recently. So you can see I took a picture on the left-hand side of the sample, and you can see that I did the squeeze method, and we see that it is able to stay together, stains my hands, and it's also sticking to my fingers a little bit. So this is a heavier soil at this location. And so based off of the guidelines in the NRCS, I'd probably estimate this somewhere around 70% field capacity, maybe even a little bit more, just knowing the soil type. And so my recommendation for that week was actually to hold off on the irrigation just a little bit longer, let that soil continue to dry out with the heat, and then allow the trees to pull from it a little bit more. When you do this, I had mentioned it in the video, but when you do this, you want to know the date and the time of when you're pulling the sample. And that's important because now if you have that information, you're now able to bridge that gap between, okay, here's the ground truth, here's the physical thing that I did. Now I can reference what that number is in the data. And so I actually highlighted that here on the screen with a red circle showcasing when I was out in the field taking the sample and what the readings were at that time. So if I would have estimated that this is at about 50% field capacity, or excuse me, 70% field capacity, I can then come here and look at the graph and I can get a more accurate read of what does 70% mean on the data coming off of my probe. So I can't read it 100% because this is a stale image, but if I were to guess, I would say it's about 265 MU or moisture units. So now I know, okay, at 70% field capacity, I'm at about 265 moisture units. And if that's my allowable depletion, if that's the way that I manage that, I only want it to deplete to 70% field capacity, then I would know that when my probe read 265, that's the time to turn water back on. But in this instance, we actually let it go a little bit longer because it's a heavier soil. So you can actually see he went a little bit longer before that blue bar across the graph came on, showing that irrigation was turned back on.
So Connor, the title of this has been, dig the hole, but really the auger is the hole digging and easier than actually digging a hole.
Yeah, I prefer the auger. You can do a backhoe pit. People will do a backhoe pit as well. That also helps to see, where are all your roots. You can definitely tell where your roots are with an auger as well. They can be sharpened and you can cut through roots. I've cut through a number of them. Actually, in that video, I was planning on showing one of the roots that I had dug up. It was about the size of my forefinger right there at the top when I had first broke through the soil. So you can get a lot of information just from one of these soil augers, and they don't break the bank. They're very cost effective, but they're an incredible tool to have on your work truck as you're going around ranch to ranch. It provides a lot of great information right away. So at this same ranch, there's another field on the north side, and I really like this ranch because the south side is very heavy and the north side is very light. So it's actually really fun to provide recommendations for, because we have to do very different schemes for each one of these fields. So I did the same process again. I went to this location, I dug down about 2 feet, and I took this picture of the sample down there, and we can see that it's a lot sandier. We can see that it has a much more grainy structure. So we know that it doesn't have the same holding capacity as the last sample does. And when I did the squeeze here, we can see that it stuck to my fingers, held a ball. So we knew that we still had good moisture, but my recommendation was to go ahead and turn the water on. We still had enough room in the soil that I wanted to try to stack it on and get ready for the heat this week. And you can see he started to add more water, and we can see in the screenshot right here that as he started to put more water, we can see this blue line start to creep up in almost like a stair step pattern. So we know that we're increasing that moisture in our profile more, so that way we got ready for the heat. So now we've seen really good examples, and we know, okay, we can do the ground truth, we know how to reference, and that's all good. But what are some of the issues that we can come across? What are some of the things that we want to pay attention to that could give us bad data? Because if we have bad data coming in, we can have bad data going out. I can't tell you the number of times I've received calls from people saying, hey, my probe is broken. And I say, well, hold on a second, let's look at the data. And sometimes the data can tell us right away what's going on. Other times we have to go and visit the field. So on the screen here, I have a list of the common issues or the common pitfalls that we'll run across that will be giving us bad data, because the probe is only as good as the data that's coming in. So you want to ensure that any sort of issues are being avoided, so that way we're getting that good data basically. And I have an example of a sample that I had pulled out where the soil was actually a little too dry. So we wanted to make sure to put some more water on that field. So you can see how when I squeezed it together, my sample broke apart very easily. And so while I was out filming the other site, I actually was able to come across one of these pitfalls in the wild. So I'll actually go ahead and stop my share, and this one's shorter than the last one, but we'll quickly see what it looks like to come across one of these situations.
Yeah, these videos are really helpful. I'm glad you took the time to put them together.
Good.
So we see this one great now. Yeah.
Perfect. All right, I'll go ahead and start it.
All right, so we're here at another Jane Logic user site, and this is another great example of some of the things that we're going to be talking about today in the webinar. So as you can see behind me, the system is running. We do have our micro sprinklers going right now. I don't know if you can see it in the video, but the sprinklers are going. Now, this customer does have a soil moisture probe with us, which is located over here. So follow me. So we can see that we actually have a junction box here, and the soil moisture probe is located. but this sprinkler is not going. This is why it's important to visit your soil moisture probe sites every once in a while to see what's going on, to make sure that this isn't happening. We have a faulty emitter right here that is not putting water out. If we unscrew this, we can see we have water, but this emitter's not working. So we want to make sure that we pay attention to this so that way we can get accurate data.
So, yeah, so great, Connor. That really interesting. And most of the issues I saw on that last slide, right, the problem pitfalls, as you referred to them, these are pretty quick visual inspections. It's not requiring a lot, right? Turning a system on and then visually inspecting.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes that's all it takes. And so some of these examples that we're going to be going through now, that's really what it boils down to sometimes, is just a real quick inspection to make sure that everything is the way that it should be before you start digging into some potentially deeper issues, which I'll wrap up today with a deeper issue, and we'll talk about what we would do to work around that. So another example of ways that the data might be bad or we might not be interpreting the data properly is this picture on the left-hand side here. And so what happened was the grower reached out to me and said, man, you know what? I've been putting on irrigation all week and I'm not seeing any changes in the soil moisture status on my probe. And I said, okay, well, let me come out, let me go ahead and dig down and let's see what's going on. So I took my auger out, I went to the first site. I started to dig down, got the first 6 inches out. And as I was cleaning out my auger, before I could even start to dig out the rest of the first foot, you can see the picture that I took here. I wasn't even able to get down a foot and the hole actually started to fill up with water. So what was going on, the reason he wasn't seeing any change in his soil moisture status was because soil acts like a bucket. So if you have a bucket, just picture a bucket and you had it filled all the way up to the top with water. If you were to even just take 1 cup and pour it on top, what happens?
Goes over the top.
Exactly, it just spills out, right? Same thing happens with soil. Soil has each soil type, each soil structure has a specific, what we call field capacity that it can hold. It's kind of like a sponge where you fill it up, and if you start to put more water on that, it starts to leak out. We get to that point of oversaturation. And so that's exactly what was happening here. Was the probes were just saying, yeah, soil's full. Doesn't matter if you put more water on it. We're just going to continue to read full. So that's something that you want to pay attention to, is if you're not seeing any change in your soil moisture status in the data, look at the scale. It might be that it's just full. So if you go out and see something like this, I would say, yeah, probably should think about cutting back a little bit or increasing the days between irrigation, for example. And then this other example here on the right-hand side was a grower reached out to me because uncharacteristically, he saw a change in his soil moisture status where all of a sudden one day it just shot up in the amount of moisture on the probe. And so I decided to go out and see what was going on. I grabbed my auger out of the bed of the truck, didn't even need to dig. As you can see here in the circle, there was a massive leak caused by just one coyote fang that had punctured the line, and it was just flooding out this row. And this leak was actually 150 feet away from the probe location, but it was putting out so much water that the water had started to move down the tree row like flood irrigation and was just flooding that probe. So that was a quick fix with the coupler, and once that starts to dry out, we'll be able to get more accurate and representative data going forward. And then a couple of my last examples here. With the rising production costs last year, one of the growers that I was working with started to pay much closer attention to his soil moisture data. And I had received a very similar call saying, you know what, Connor, I'm irrigating and I'm irrigating and I'm irrigating, and I'm just not seeing the soil moisture increase. So I looked over his data, and yeah, sure enough, we just saw that the soil moisture was just continuing to decline. And I said, well, are you near that site now? He said, yeah, I'm just down the road from it. I said, would you please go and look to see if there's anything out of the ordinary that might be the reason for this? And he visited the site and he gave me a call back and he said, yeah, the probes on one side of the berm and my irrigation lines on the other side of the berm. I said, Well, there's your problem. The probe can't read through the berm. You need to move that line to the other side. And so you can see, I put the red arrow there highlighting as soon as he moved that irrigation line to the other side, that moisture status increased dramatically, and we got much more representative readings of what was going on out in the field. So this is definitely something that should perk your ears up. You can see down below, he ran for almost 72 hours on one set, and he just wasn't getting any response from the probe. So right away, that should be an indicator that, I might have something going on out in the field if my probe is still showing that it's dry and I'm putting on these long irrigation sets.
Yeah, wow, what a difference, and what a simple solution that you offered him again.
Right. So again, this is all part of the ground truthing process. We want to be able to have something that we're familiar with that we can then take and refer to a number and start to put some numbers to our practices. So that way it helps us to be more efficient and also helps us to manage slightly differently. And then another example that I have is, it was a very similar situation. This grower was putting on 80 to 90 hours at a time in almonds, and he just wasn't getting past a foot. So I drove out to the field. He had excellent looking cover crop in the field. And sure enough, walking out there, I had new soles on the bottom of my boots because the clay was just sticking to my feet. And I'm not trying to like toot my horn or anything, but I feel like I'm a pretty physically fit guy. And I kid you not, I go to start augering down. I could not, for the life of me, I could not get past 1 foot deep. His soil was so locked up because he had been irrigating with pure canal water for so long that it was too clean, and it caused his soil to bind up, and he wasn't getting past 1 foot. So,
oh my gosh.
This is an example of, irrigation management is our first line of defense when we're dealing with challenges out in the field. And so having tools like this helps us even better to nip any issues in the bud. But sometimes it goes beyond just management practices, right?
Yeah, no kidding. So like you said, boots in the field make all the difference. And this is a great way to combine a grower's experience with some scientific data. What you get out of that is so much better than each one individually.
Exactly. Another way that might ring true with people is, I'd rather plow a field with a D10 tractor than doing it with a plow mule and an old plow. I could do it, I could get it done, but the D10 would be a lot nicer to get it done with. And I could go even deeper than I could with the mule and the plow by hand. So, when irrigation management starts to reach its limits, and we come up with an instance like this, we have to start looking towards different amendments to start helping us. So not only do we have access to tools like soil moisture probes and sensors and automation, but we actually started to partner with a company called Precision Laboratories, and they have different water treatments that help with different scenarios. So in this last example that I gave, it's actually a great situation where we could apply something like a domino, and that would help us start to loosen up and start to get some of that penetration deeper into the soil like we're looking to get. And they have various products. So, for example, sandy soil, if we needed to try to hold on to the water a little bit longer, because maybe we have an old pump, and I know everybody knows this, pump guys are in high demand right now. And if you got to hold on for a little bit longer, you might want to look at using something like a Stretta or Tolero, where we can actually hold on to the soil moisture a little bit longer and increase that holding capacity of something like a lighter, sandier soil. So that way we can try to stretch our dollars a little bit further until we can get that pump with the higher output in. So
I've used some of those surfactants myself, and man,
oh, there you go.
Really positive results.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of really positive results here with the trials that we're doing here in the Valley. And so with that kind of brings me towards the end here. So, if this is something that you've been thinking about, or maybe you're facing some challenges, or maybe you're a little confused on, what exactly your soil moisture probe data means, I hope that by listening in today, that this was able to provide some helpful tips and some helpful tricks, and also some things to look out for while you're going about that.
Yeah, Connor, this was great. This was a real home run. We have time for one more question here. And this person's asking, do you prefer to measure emitter discharge around the probe site?
Emitter discharge around the probe site. Oh, I think I understand what you're asking. So it's so like the example with the drip line on the other side of the berm, probes only read 3, maybe 5 centimeters away from the side of the probe. So it's very important that you make sure that your emitter, whatever that is in a foot of your probe location. So I had talked about that in the first video. We had talked about the blue donut. So if you're using a micro sprinkler, sometimes what can happen with like the jets, for example, is when the system turns on, there's enough torque in the pressure that it can turn it ever so slightly. And over the course of the season, that little jet stream that was hitting your probe can move off to the side and skew your information a little bit. So you really want to make sure that, yes, your emitter is influencing your probe data properly. So I always recommend within, I like to say 6 to 8 inches, but you can get away with within a foot of the nearest emitter.
Yeah, very helpful. Thank you. And Connor, great job today. I love the videos. We got to see more of those going forward.
Yeah, we'll do it.
Yeah, well, we hope you'll come back and share some more of those videos with us. They were fantastic. And for all our viewers, take a look at Connor's contact information here. It's a really generous offer. I hope you'll take him up on it because as you can tell, Connor lives for this stuff. This is what he does every day. He's passionate about it. He lives for this, and so he's happy to help you. That'll really make his day. So remember, you can watch all our trainings at janesusa.com/trainings or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. I think it's really cool that we have people out there working, going about their day and educating themselves on water management at the same time, especially when we're in the middle of the mega drought in the West. That's really encouraging that we're going to beat this. So Connor, again, thanks very much. Really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And thanks everybody. Have a nice weekend and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.